Welcome, brave listeners, to Wilhelm Presents Frightening Tales. I'm your host, Wilhelm. Tune in each week where I entertain my listeners with another dark and creepy tale of the paranormal, donated by authors from around the world. If you're an author of some paranormal fiction and would like to share a story with my listeners, submit one at frighteningtales.com. And while you're there, tune in for more than 40 hours of previous content. Today's episode is written by Kristopher Cisneros, a writer from Corpus Christi, Texas. Kristopher also works with a local theater group to create original plays and has written and directed a short film titled Viewfinder, which won Best of Fest at the South Texas Underground Film Festival in Corpus Christi. Among other accolades, he's accrued for an assortment of writing. Storytelling is near and dear to Kristopher, and he'll use any medium he can dig his claws into. Today's tale is called The Mystery of Emma Villanueva. Mama's biggest fear was that we would resent her for her decisions and abandon her, just like her mother had when she was born. Mama lived in a foster home, a place of whispered cruelties and silent tears, until the night of her 16th birthday. On that night, she fled her life of torment, venturing down the uncharted road in search of the elusive American dream. After 2 years of hard traveling, destiny guided her to a lonely truck stop outside of Flagstaff. There, under the flickering neon lights, she met Reggie Wayne Monroe. The air was thick with the scent of diesel and old coffee. They talked into the early morning hours, sharing cigarettes and coffee-stained confessions. 1 year later, my sister Dicey was born. 3 revolutions around the sun afterward, I joined this wild ride through cosmos. My name is Scooter Monroe. It was the night of my 13th birthday, and I was all alone, scrolling the Netflix menu aimlessly, looking for anything to fill my time, but failing at it. I gave up and picked up a book that I wanted to read for some time, The Lost Boy by Thomas Wolfe. I became so immersed in the story of a life cut short by tragedy the time slipped by unnoticed. But before I knew it, I heard Mama's car pulling up the gravel driveway. She warily entered the trailer home after another grueling shift at the diner and slumped onto the sofa. Her eyes, tired and distant, reflected years of hard knocks. The black eye Reggie had given her 3 nights before had begun to peek through her makeup. She looked around the partially darkened room and asked, "Where's Dicey?" I replied with a half shrug. "What am I gonna do with that girl?" She fumed and shed her shoes like a snake sheds its skin. "I had another nightmare, Mama," I whispered, a chill creeping over my body as the dream's vivid images crashed into my mind like waves against a forsaken, crumbling shoreline. For weeks now, I had been tormented by these relentless nightmares and insomnia, the line between dreams and reality blurring in my exhausted mind. Night after night, I'd wake up trembling and cold. My heart pounded in my chest. Shadows loomed large in the corners of my room. I'd wake up in a panic, convinced there was someone or something in there with me. More often than not, I'd frantically leap out of bed and search every corner, not knowing exactly what I was looking for. I kept a journal of my dreams and experiences in a sketchbook, which soon became a collection of unsettling images and cryptic messages. "Didn't I ask you to do the dishes?" Mama replied, and stretched, her tired bones popping loudly. "No, you told Dicey. I reminded her," setting the book down, the Thomas Wolfe novel. "Mama, what about my nightmare?" "I told you, Scooter, nightmares can't hurt you," she responded and yawned. "Real people, they hurt a lot." I crossed my arms tightly around my body, anger simmering in the pit of my stomach, desperate for release. I slumped back into the sofa and fought back the urge to scream at her for letting Reggie leave, for letting Dicey get out of control, and for forgetting my birthday. But as she lay down and closed her eyes, I saw the weariness etched into her face. Mama was worn thin. So I just sat there, lost in contemplation, for a few moments before I finally asked, "Is Reggie ever coming back?" Deep down, I already knew the answer. Mama remained silent for a moment, rubbed her darkened eye, and murmured, "Happy birthday." I rose quietly and slipped away to my room, the weight of our family troubles churning like a hurricane. Later that night, the storm would make landfall. Through the thin walls of our trailer home, I heard Mama and Dicey's bitter argument, a painful symphony that seemed to stretch into eternity. Unable to bear it any longer, and desperate for an escape, I put my headphones on to drown out their discord and cried. In the morning, I caught Mama as I headed out for school. "Did you get the text I sent you yesterday about the cop, Mama?" I asked her. "He called on the wall phone." Mama grabbed her phone and began to check her messages. "I don't see any text message from you, Scooter." I checked my phone and found that I had neglected to send the message and apologized to her. "What did the cop want? Was this about Daddy?" she asked as she read my message. I shook my head. "What was it then?" "He wanted to talk to you about one of your relatives. I told him you were at work. He left that number." "One of my relatives? I've only got you and your sister," Mama said. "Mama, why do we still have that wall phone if we all have our cells?" Mama's gaze flickered between me and the wall phone, then down to my shoes. She went down on one knee and began tying my laces. At 13, I still couldn't tie my own laces. "Go to school," she said, and stayed on the floor, her head pressed between her knees. When I got back home, Mama was sitting alone in the dark. "Are you okay, Mama?" I asked softly, approaching her with cautious steps. "Did you call the cop?" She nodded, fanning herself with trembling hands. As I placed mine on her shoulders, she looked up at me with reddened eyes. Mama was a natural beauty, her hair long and the color of mud after a spring rain, her skin warm tan like coffee with cream, her hazel eyes once sparkling, now dimmed by a life with Reggie. The cop's name was Josh Higgins, and he's with the Georgia State Troopers. He said that he had some information on my mom. She told me, her lip quivering. My real mom? Wow. What did he say? I don't want to talk about it, Scooter, she replied, fighting back her tears. Okay, Mama, I answered, hanging my head in understanding. Suddenly, she sprang to her feet, nostrils flaring, fists clenched at her sides, and erupted into a bitter rant. That woman abandoned me as a newborn, wouldn't even look at me, didn't want to hold me. That's what the nurses told my adoptive parents. My foster folks were the worst, cruel and abusive. I spent 16 years in hell because of her. She paced back and forth, pulling hard at her hair and stomping her feet. The tears streamed down her face like raging rivers. I retreated behind the couch, watching in horrified fascination as all the demons of her past fought against one another to escape her body like lava from a volcano. She marched to the front door, gazing out at the trailer park's bustling scene. Kids racing around happily in their youth, women with babies in their arms, laughing in the face of their past mistakes, and the tired horde of blue-collar Americans dragging themselves in from another day in the toils of life. She took a few deep breaths and wiped the tears away with her forearm. Well, she's dead now anyhow, Mama whispered, pushing open the door and stepping out. She sat on the front porch for the rest of the night, lost in her valley of memories, smoking cigarette after cigarette. My favorite anime series, Erased, was on Netflix, but I couldn't bring myself to watch it, worrying for Mama gnawed at me. Dicey plopped down beside me on the sofa, her voice hushed. What's up with her? She asked. She got some bad news today, I replied. Dicey was raw and unpolished, a portrait of juvenile defiance in shades of trailer park grit. She embraced her status as poor white trash, relishing the disdainful glances that followed her everywhere she went. Dicey's hair was long and fell around her like spilled ink. Her eyes were deep pools of darkness, each glance a silent invitation into the unknown, and her skin was baked tan by the Arizona sun. Too bad for Dicey that her pretty facade was overshadowed by her bad attitude. Dicey accidentally sat on my book, pulled it out, and read the title aloud. The Lost Boy? That's about vampires, right? She quipped. No, I began, but Dicey cut me off with a carefree grin. Don't care, Scooter, she said, snatching the remote and propping her feet on my lap. She scrolled through the menu. The news was about her real mom, I interjected. She's dead. Hey, Bill and Ted, Dicey retorted, dismissing me once more. I shook my head and said nothing, though there was plenty I wanted to. Instead, I stared at Mama, her ghostly silhouette outlined in the dim light, until it was time to go to bed. In the morning, the sun's rays punched through my eyelids, rousing me from another restless sleep. Mama stood over me, bright-eyed with a wide smile plastered on her face. Mama, I groaned, retreating under my blankets. Wake up, Scooter. We're going on a little vacation," she exclaimed, pulling my covers off. Shielding my eyes with my forearms, I mumbled, "Vacation? What about school?" "You'll be out for summer break in 2 days anyhow. Besides, I spoke with Zoila last night." "The witch?" "The psychic. Anyway, she said we would find all the answers to our problems in Georgia." "Who's Georgia?" I replied. "Georgia, the state, silly Willie. Now, I want you packed and ready to go in 10 minutes, she ordered, marching out of my room. I never thought Mama would take us clear across the country on the advice of a psychic. But wouldn't you know it, she sold Reggie's old Dodge truck, collected her last paycheck from the diner, and had us on the road before lunchtime. From the back seat of our orange HHR, I watched the Flagstaff town limit sign shrink into the distance. Feeling electric currents pulse through my veins, it was the first time leaving Flagstaff, and despite my doubts, a thrill of anticipation surged within me, a hesitant smile tugging at my lips. We drove for hours, the road stretching endlessly before us. The monotony of the journey lulled me to sleep, and soon I found myself ensnared in another nightmare. Repeated blows from a heavy object struck the back of my head. I plunged into some murky waters, where suffocating darkness engulfed me. I thrashed and fought against an unseen force which dragged me deeper. Gasping for air, I jolted awake, coughing uncontrollably and rubbing my watery eyes. As my vision cleared, I was greeted by a neon red glow, casting surreal shadows inside the car. I sat there for a moment, shaking off my fear. The nightmares were becoming increasingly vivid, clinging to me long after I woke up. Each time it took longer to recover my bearings, to distinguish between sleep and waking reality. Leaning towards the window, I peered out at a looming sign that pierced the night, the Last Chance Motel. Its words stood stark against the darkness, an eerie beacon promising shelter. After taking a few deep breaths to calm myself down, I reached over and shook Dicey awake. "Cut it out," she shouted, swatting at me. "Where are we?" "Texas," she replied, pushing down on the button to lower her window. It only went down halfway. "Stupid car," she muttered, smashing the button. "Mama said it's going to be a classic someday. It's a piece of crap is what it is now. We're in Clarendon." I blurted out after a Google search of the motel name. "Great," Dicey replied sarcastically and closed her eyes again. I pushed open my door and got out. The night was heavy with dampness, the air thick with heat and the lingering scent of diesel. Strolling along the edge of the parking lot, I tilted my head to gaze at the sky. It seemed as if every star in the universe had unveiled itself that night, each one a tiny luminescent gem against the expansive black canopy. One even fell, cutting a fiery streak across the heavens. The pain at the back of my head had eased, but the memory of the dream lingered, unsettling me. The thought of sinking into the abyss and being lost forever haunted my thoughts. Suddenly, my loose shoelace snagged, causing me to stumble. As I struggled to regain my balance, an 18-wheeler roared past, so close that its gust of wind knocked me back. Mama rushed over, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief, and lifted me up. Why don't you pay attention to what you're doing? She scolded me. I was just... Marching me over to the car, she shoved me into the back seat, then circled around, got in, and slammed the door behind her. Why weren't you watching your brother? She snapped at Dicey. Dicey turned back, her expression contorted into a scowl as she cast a disapproving look in my direction. He's not a baby, she pouted, and sank into her seat. He almost got hit by a truck out there. I'm okay, Mama, I told her, leaning forward. Mama took a deep breath and calmly said, I got us a single bed, so when we drive past the front desk, duck down where the clerk won't see you. That's so stupid, Dicey huffed. I'm trying to save us some money here, okay? Mama fired back. Dicey sank down to the floor as I laid across the back seat, staring at the flashing red sign, repeating the motel name in my head. The night was abruptly shaken awake by a tidal wave of pain. A paralyzing bolt of torment ran down my spine. The world around me blurred into disorienting flashes. White and black fragments painted a disjointed, bewildering picture. A mysterious silhouette peeked at me from the half-open bathroom door. She had long hair which hung down, creating an eerie aurora that sent chills through my bones. In an instant, she was gone. I lost all courage and hastily retreated under my blanket, seeking refuge from the unexplained. As I trembled beneath the covers, doubts ate away at my mind. Maybe there wasn't anyone there. I reassured myself, attempting to dispel the unease that clung to the room like a phantom. Time seemed to slow down as I wrestled with the internal conflict of curiosity and fear. Eventually, finding an ounce of courage, I cast aside the safety of the blanket and opened my eyes to find only the encompassing darkness of night, punctuated by the faint streaks of neon red light seeping in from outside. My head still ached. My senses were on edge. As I stumbled to the bathroom and flicked on the lights, it was empty. Tension gripped my body. Goosebumps raced down my arms as I cautiously approached the shower curtain. Taking a deep breath and counting to 3, I pulled it back, half expecting the woman from The Shining to be in there, but found it empty. A smile wafted across my face, just as I had begun to let the idea that I had imagined the whole thing take root. A disembodied voice called out my name from the shower drain. My body weakened and I felt the blood drain from my face. The voice called to me again. My limbs trembled like tree branches in the grip of a relentless storm. I sank to all fours, fixating my gaze into the abyss of the drain, and thought that I had finally gone crazy. Mama sent me to a psychologist on the suggestion of the bobbleheads at school, who wanted to place me in a special class, claiming I wasn't learning at the same rate as the other kids. Your son can't even tie his shoes, Mrs. Monroe, they insisted. The psychologist offered an explanation, suggesting that my nightmares, fears, and anxieties stemmed from not receiving enough attention as a baby. He labeled my inability to tie my shoes as psychosomatic or something like that. Mama, however, wasn't buying any of it. She called bullcrap on the entire assessment and I never saw the psychologist again. "What the hell are you doing?" Dicey asked, when she found me looking into the shower drain. I snapped around quickly, another dizzy spell hitting me. "I dropped something down the drain," I answered, nursing my head. "Well, I have to take a piss, so get out," Dicey retorted impatiently. I rolled my eyes, got to my feet, and rushed out of the bathroom. The next day, we drove non-stop across Oklahoma, Arkansas, and into Mississippi. Throughout the whole trip, I had to endure Mama's 80s playlist and her arguments with Dicey. I tuned them out by reading from my Thomas Wolfe novel. We had potted meat sandwiches and soda pops for lunch in the parking lot of a Buc-ee's. Mama lip-sang to the song on the radio. "Let us die young, or let us live forever. We don't have the power, but we never say never." Dicey entertained herself with some pointless TikTok videos, and I sketched the phantom I saw the night before. "I'll be right back," Mama said, and exited the car. She stuck her head into the window and added, "Wait here." Watching Mama pace the parking lot a while, talking on her phone, I asked Dicey, "I wonder who she's talking to." "She's probably talking to Zoila," Dicey answered, hanging her head out the car window. "She's so stupid. This whole trip is so stupid." "What's up with you lately, Dicey? You were never like this before. We all used to be so tight. Now you and Mama fight all the time, and you ignore me, or act like you hate me, and you disappear all the time." "Aw," Dicey replied with a smirk. She was staring at me through the door mirror. "When you're not gone, you're acting like a real—" "Watch it, Scooter," she warned, narrowing her eyes. "Jerk." Dicey shoved me back against the seat and threatened, "I'll bruise that eye of yours if you don't take it back." I didn't say a word. She took a fistful of my shirt and pulled me forward. "Take it back," she shouted, her fist at my face. I take it back." She released me. "I hate what's going on with us, Dicey. I hate that Reggie went away," I said, my eyes welling with tears. "Don't be such a baby," was her only reply to my laments. "I'm not a baby," I fired back. "Dude, you can't even tie your own shoes." Dicey pushed open her door and stepped out of the car. She stretched her back and walked off towards the store. "I told you to wait in the car," Mama shouted at her when she saw her. Dicey threw her the middle finger before entering the store. Mama hung up the phone and chased after her. Their argument echoed over the roar of passing big rigs as they returned to the car. Mama was fuming red, and Dicey's face was etched with a deep frown. "I don't deserve this from you, Dicey. Do you hear me?" Mama barked. "I don't know what I did to make you so angry at me. I work to keep this family together, and what do I get in return? Nothing but attitude." The air in the car was tense, to say the least. Mama banged her head on the steering wheel and began to cry. Dicey and I exchanged worried glances, remaining silent as we waited. Overwhelmed by her emotions, Mama turned the key, but the car wouldn't start. She kept turning it, banging on the wheel and pumping the gas until the engine roared to life. We sped off onto the interstate, leaving Mississippi behind. Our journey continued into the night, no one making a peep. each of us lost in our own reflections, only the hum of the passing road as our soundtrack. Finally, we made it to Tanis, Georgia, and Mama got us a motel room. We all slept soundly, allowing the echoes of turmoil to fade into peaceful quiet. In the morning, the tension loomed like a specter as Mama and Dicey ignored each other, moving around the small room with unspoken animosity. It seemed almost comical to me, their silent dance of avoidance in the confined space. At breakfast, Mama broke her silence, her voice faltering slightly as she shared with us the haunting tale of our grandmother. Her name was Emma Villanueva, Mama began. Heavy with emotion, she continued. The police found her remains in a swamp where she'd been for almost 40 years. She paused, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I couldn't bear to hear any more from the cops over the phone, she continued, so I decided to come to Georgia to uncover more about her for myself. She's at a local funeral home. Mama wiped her nose with a napkin and her head hung low. We're going there this afternoon. I was stunned. The weight of Mama's revelation brought with it an uneasy stillness. I struggled to grasp the reality of it all. I had never known Emma and didn't feel connected to her. Yet a strange sorrow washed over me, sending shivers down my spine. Mama approached the front desk at the Paul Jackson and Sons mortuary, her expression a mix of determination and grief. We're here for Emma Villanueva, she said softly, her voice barely audible above the noise of office work. The attendant nodded solemnly and led us down a narrow corridor lined with weathered portraits and flickering candles. The scent of melting wax and old wood filled the air. Wait here, she said in a monotone voice. We sat in a dimly lit room, awaiting the funeral director. The walls were painted a somber beige, and some plastic flowers sat dusty and forgotten. The old dark drapes hung heavy, casting shadows in the corners, just as I had imagined a funeral home would be. A gray-haired man emerged from the back area and silently gestured for us to follow him. He led us down another narrow corridor to a room where a gurney stood against the wall, draped with a white shroud. My breath hitched. My heart sank at the sight of the lumps under the shroud. That was my grandma. The funeral director whispered to Mama, "Here is Emma Villanueva. It's only a suggestion, but I wouldn't pull back the sheet." He motioned to Dicey and me with his eyes. Mama nodded. The man stepped out, closing the door behind him. Mama slowly approached the sheet, reaching out and feeling it with the tips of her fingers. "Why?" she asked, choking up. "Didn't you want me?" Her voice cracked, each word dripping with years of pent-up pain. I stood still as a statue, and Dicey teared up. "Those people did such horrible things to me," she lamented, beginning to cry. "I had no one." Mama shook her head and wiped away the tears from her eyes. "I can't do this," she said, hurrying out the door. Dicey hung her head and wrapped her arms around her body as she followed Mama out. The air grew colder, and the lights seemed to waver as I stood there, staring at Emma. My emotions swirled within me like planets orbiting a star. Each of my thoughts clashed with the next, causing my body to convulse and my eyes to well up. A haunting melody blasted in my head, its intensity hurting my ears, while a sharp pain dropped me to my knees. The room blurred into darkness and my body shivered. Black waters rushed in from an unknown source and filled the room. I wanted to call out for help, but my voice was stolen from me. I collapsed, the waters encircling me as I writhed in pain. It's strong, and it's sudden, and it's cruel sometimes, but it might just save your life. The words echoed in the abyss. Dicey opened the door and the lobby light flooded in. "What the heck is the matter with you?" she asked as I lay on the floor. Nothing, I replied. "Come on, weirdo. Mama wants to go," she said, the song dying away as I looked up at the shroud. I slowly got to my feet, my head still in a tailspin, and ran out the door. The weight of the moment blanketed me like a heavy fog, and the echoes of the song, a haunting tune to an already emotional journey. Back in our motel room, I wrote the lyrics into my sketchbook under a crude drawing of the gurney draped in the white shroud, a puzzle begging to be deciphered. Mama paced, her voice hushed, as she spoke with Josh Higgins on the phone. Her words carried an undertone of suspense that left me on edge. With each passing moment, the story unraveled like a tightly wound thread, leaving me yearning for the missing pieces. Mama agreed to meet Josh Higgins at the Tanis police station at 4 that afternoon. Before she left, she placed a $20 bill on top of the TV for us to buy a pizza for dinner, telling us she wasn't sure how long her meeting with the cop would last. With a parting glance, Mama stepped out into the glaring afternoon light, the door whispering shut behind her. "Good. She's gone," Dicey said. Then she turned to me and said, "Come on, let's get out of here." "Where to?" "This whole trip has been a real downer. Let's see if we can't find something fun to do," she proposed, her tone a brushstroke of rebellion against the gloom. "I don't think we—" "Don't be a baby, Scooter," she snapped, seizing the $20 from atop the TV. "I'm not a—" Ignoring my protest, Dicey swung the door open, fixing me with a determined gaze. "Are you coming or what?" My eyes gravitated downward to my shoelaces. Dicey, in a gesture of impatience, sighed and dropped to her knees, tying them for me. "Let's go, you little baby," she said, and shoved me out the door. "I'm not a baby." "Whatever." We stepped into the afternoon's canvas, where the air hummed with languid energy, and the world shimmered under the heat waves rising from the pavement. Each of our steps a choreographed dance with the sweltering breeze, while the sounds of the Georgian landscape echoed with the distant drone of cicadas, orchestrating a natural melody. The sun, casting long shadows, bathed the buildings in a haunting golden hue. The southern heat, unlike the familiar desert back home, enveloped me like a suffocating quilt, its dense, demanding air turning each breath into a hard task. Sweat coated my skin, clinging to me with a glistening film. We followed some train tracks that stretched out like a metallic ribbon without end. Dicey and I followed their path until a collective intuition urged us to veer towards the heart of Tanis. The town's secrets whispered through moss-covered trees, beckoning us to uncover the stories woven into the fabric of its main street. The town reminded me of something I'd seen in an old television show, the local movie theater, closed and deserted, stood as a sad reminder of the changing times. Its marquee still announced the movie Frozen, and faded red letters. All the buildings were beaten down by time, and the few people we saw moved slowly, as if time had them captured in its clutches. In only a matter of minutes, we strolled the entire length of Main Street, realizing there wasn't much to see or do. Despite the town's Hawkins, Indiana-esque feel, I found it boring. A surprising pang of homesickness crept in, my thoughts drifting to the familiar comforts of the trailer park back home. Dicey and I, our energy sapped, rested on a park bench beneath the shadow of an old oak tree covered in Spanish moss. The cicadas sang lullabies in the branches as we sank into a wearied reprieve from the relentless Georgian heat. A gang of boys breezed through the desolate streets on their bikes, their echoes of their laughter briefly disrupting the cicadas' song. Two elderly men sat in front of a barbershop fanning themselves with newspapers, their presence mirroring the essence of Tanis, as though they were the pillars that had held the town up over the years. The rhythmic ticking of time became palpable as the traffic dwindled to just one car, passing every few minutes. "Well, this sucks," Dicey exclaimed. "It's not Flagstaff, that's for sure," I remarked, wiping the sweat from my forehead. "And what about this heat?" Dicey added. She smashed a mosquito on her arm. "What on earth is up with these bugs? Oh my God!" "We have mosquitoes back home too," I said, and rolled my eyes. "Let's head back to the motel and get that pizza," Dicey suggested as she got up from the bench. "Hey," I squealed, tugging at Dicey's sleeve when my eyes caught sight of an arcade machine nestled inside a laundromat. "What?" she queried, scanning the surroundings. "Galaga!" I shouted with childlike enthusiasm and leapt to my feet. I darted across the train tracks to the laundromat, my gaze fixated on the arcade machine as if it were a rare masterpiece in an art museum. Dicey rolled her eyes and remarked, "Really, dude?" as she chased after me. Bursting through the laundromat doors, I made a beeline for the arcade. I haven't played Galaga in a really long time. "You play games on your phone all the time, Scooter. It's not the same thing. You got a quarter?" Dicey fished a handful of loose change from her pocket, the jingling coins falling into my quivering hands. I fed a quarter into the arcade machine and a wave of nostalgia enveloped me as the 8-bit music chimed in. Obliterating my way through the first few stages, I reveled in my digital triumph while Dicey, seemingly disinterested, captured moments for her Instagram page in a flurry of selfies. A half hour later, having amassed an impressive score and exhausting all my spaceships, I faced the inevitable game over. Turning around to share my triumph with Dicey, I found her conspicuously absent. Venturing into the parking lot, I discovered her talking with an older man beside a muddy red pickup truck with big tires. I ran over, tugged at her sleeve, and said, "Can we go now?" "You go ahead. I'm hanging out with," Dicey began, her voice trailing off in the company of the mysterious man and the hum of cicadas around us. "Todd," the blonde-haired dude said, flashing a shark-toothed grin at me. Todd hid his blonde mullet, which was in desperate need of a trim, under a trucker cap with a beer logo on it. His jeans were faded and stained, evidence of hard work under the southern sun, and his boots muddy. He reeked of cigarette smoke, and his bushy yellow mustache hung down over his lip. "No, you come too," I implored my sister. She shrugged me off. Todd cracked open a beer and offered it to Dicey. "Do you drink, honey?" he asked. Dicey smiled, casting a sidelong glance at me. "Yeah," she replied, and took the beer. "I'm going to a beach party at Mercer Point. Do you want to come? It'll be fun," Todd invited. Dicey gulped some beer, her enthusiasm palpable as she nodded. "Dicey, I don't think," I began, my concern surfacing. "Scooter, what's your damage?" Dicey interrupted. "You can come along too, little bro," Todd interjected, flashing his shark smile at me. "It's getting dark," I pleaded with my sister. "We gotta get back in time for Mama." Dicey ignored me, telling Todd she was ready to go. "Good girl," he praised, lifting her into his truck. "It's past your bedtime, little bro. Why don't you just run along now?" he sneered, shoving me aside. The truck roared like a monster from the darkest nightmare and left behind a puff of dirty smoke as it raced away into the twilight. "Dicey, come back!" I shouted as I chased after them. A distant train whistle boomed, and the truck sped up, barely making it over the tracks, narrowly beating the descending crossing arms. The passing train brought my chase to an abrupt halt. Panicking, I pulled out my phone and called Mama. "What is it, Scooter?" she asked when she answered. "It's Dicey," I shouted, the desperation evident in my voice. "She went with some... What's all that noise?" "A train. Mama, Dicey went with some..." The train roared past, a metallic behemoth speeding through the southern Gothic. As I dashed across the tracks, my heart pounded in sync with its fading passage. My phone flickered and died as soon as I reached the other side. Frantically, I jabbed at the lifeless screen, hoping to resurrect it, but my efforts were as futile as trying to catch a ghost. Desperation crept in as I scanned the streets, desolate like an abandoned stage. Not a soul in sight, only the winds whispering through empty alleyways. A glimmer of hope emerged at the corner, a phone booth. I sprinted towards it, the urgency of my situation resounding with each footstep. Hastily, I dialed 911. Only to be met with a piercing screech that echoed through the booth. Disheartened, I ran down the main street where the closed storefronts stood like silent sentinels guarding sinister secrets. Night descended swiftly, bringing with it a bone-chilling darkness. I took notice of the digital clock above the City Hall building, which proclaimed the hour 11:45 p.m. I glanced at my wristwatch, frozen at 7:25 p.m. Frustration gripped me as I shook my wrist, attempting to defy the standstill. I pressed my ear against the watch, straining to catch its faint clicks, when my attention shifted to an advertisement adorning a storefront window, proudly showcasing the new Nintendo Entertainment System. A spontaneous smile played on my lips as I read the words aloud to myself. Suddenly, a radiant glow enveloped me, its brilliance akin to the afternoon sun. Across the street, the movie theater's marquee came alive. It proclaimed in bright red letters, "The Breakfast Club, this year's best comedy, now playing." Baffled by his intriguing transformation, I read the words, "This year's best comedy," aloud. And as if drawn by an irresistible force, I found myself stepping onto the street, compelled towards the luminous beckoning of the marquee. Suddenly, the world around me turned blinding white as two headlights barreled down on me. I slipped on the slick street, crashing onto the cold pavement, my surroundings a dizzying blur. The screech of brakes echoed, the car grinding to a halt a few inches from my face, the acrid smell of burnt rubber rushing into my nostrils. A door slammed open and the figure emerged from the vehicle. From the car's radio, I heard the song that Mama had sung, Forever Young by Alpha something. "Kid, you all right?" the driver panted. "Need any help?" My eyes fixated on the car's registration, the number 85 staring back at me. Springing to my feet, I took measured breaths, realizing I had narrowly avoided becoming a casualty in the surreal drama of Tanis's deserted streets. "What the hell were you doing in the middle of the road?" he barked, his face obscured by the exhales of his breath, a mysterious figure in the enigmatic night. "I'm looking for my sister," I answered, my teeth chattering. I stood there perplexed as the cold ran down my spine, a mixture of wonder and unease. I questioned the boundaries of reality. Was all this merely a trick of my mind, or was I in the middle of another nightmare? The man trembled and fidgeted with the zipper of his jacket while constantly looking around. "Stay off the road, huh?" he growled and got back in his metallic gray car. He was gone in a flash, the song fading away with him. I stumbled across the street and sat on the curb in front of a Radio Shack, wrapping my arms around my body in a vain attempt to fight off the frigid air. My shoelaces were untied as I tucked them into my shoes. In the corner of my eye, I saw someone dart across the other side. "Hey!" I shouted, but the girl didn't acknowledge me. I jumped to my feet and chased after her. When I rounded the corner, I cried out, "Please, help me!" She stopped, the puffs of breath rising into the night sky, and turned to me. I jogged over to her. "I need to find my sister," I said, wheezing. "She went to some place called Mercer Point. Do you know where that is?" The girl stared at me with dark, cold eyes for a moment, before responding in a tired voice drained of emotion. "I'm not from around here." Though I couldn't place it then, there was something hauntingly familiar about her eyes. She turned and started walking away. My gaze went up to a billboard that peaked above the treetops. It advertised the 1985 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. As I studied the billboard, a plea surfaced in my voice. "I need to know something, please." The girl kept on going. "Please," I shouted. She sighed loudly, crossing her arms, and snapped around. "Yeah? What?" Under the glow of the street lamp, her features were revealed. Her hair, long and black as the night, framed a face that spoke of hardship, thin and pale, with dark circles around her eyes and chapped lips. She wore a dingy white shirt stained with blood, which she quickly covered up with a green army jacket. Her sneakers bore the wear and tear of hard traveling, and flung over her shoulder was a red backpack. She couldn't have been any older than 15 or 16. "Well?" she queried, awaiting my question. "What year is this?" "Oh, come on," she barked and began to move away from me. "Please, I think my sister's in trouble and I need to get to her." She stared hard at me for a moment and then murmured, 1985. I was floored and struggled to process the revelation and began to babble. She interrupted my shock to the system and said, "Your shoelaces are untied, by the way." And she walked away. I quickly tucked my laces into my shoes. Fueled by a newfound urgency, I chased her down the rabbit hole. She darted across the interstate, leaving me stranded as the traffic intensified. It took me some time to navigate the busy street and reach a truck stop on the other side. Peering through the diner window, an eerie déjà vu-like feeling gripped me. The diner seemed stuck in a bygone era, and the patrons, lost in their own words, were like NPCs in a cosmic role-playing game, each playing a scripted part in the unfolding drama of my nocturnal adventures. The old tube television, suspended above the bar, emitted a flickering glow and played an episode of some TV show with that guy from Back to the Future. Watching from the outside carried a sense of detachment, as if the diner existed in a temporal bubble separate from the reality beyond its walls. The car pulled up to the pumps, the blaring music invading my senses. Though unfamiliar the lyrics, every time you go away, you take a piece of me with you. I made notes so that I could write them down later. The mysterious girl emerged from the restrooms and slipped out a side door. I rushed around the diner, but she vanished by the time I reached the other side. Returning to the interstate, I strained my eyes for any sign of her, but she was gone. The metallic gray car reappeared, the word Supra emblazoned across the back. Its headlights briefly illuminated a road sign that read Mercer Point. With a surge of determination, I sprinted along the shoulder of the road, praying that I could reach Dicey before it was too late. After an exhausting run along a sandy path, I reached the beach. The winds howled like a distant wail, and the crashing waves provided a relentless, ominous soundtrack. The brightest full moon I'd ever seen hovered in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over my desperation. An eerie stillness settled in, as if the very air was holding its breath. Sprinting up and down the beach, I shouted Dicey's name into the void, but got no reply. Thoughts raced chaotically through my mind as I turned to head back to the main road. Then an ear-piercing scream shattered the night, freezing my blood. "Dicey!" I mumbled, my heart pounding. Each scream that followed was more horrifying than the last. As I ran toward the source of the screams, I tripped on my shoelaces and hastily tied them in knots. I clawed my way to the top of the dunes where I spotted some headlights. It wasn't Todd's red pickup truck, but the Supra. "Hey!" I shouted at the driver as he slammed shut the trunk of his car. Startled, he jumped into the Supra and sped away. Those lyrics, it's strong and it's sudden and it's cruel sometimes, but it might just save your life, screamed at me from the car's radio. The man left something behind on the ground. Jogging over, I picked it up. It was the red backpack. As I examined it, I realized my hands were stained with blood. Shocked, I dropped the bag, my body going limp. Breathing became a struggle, and I collapsed in a heap on the sand. I started heaving, fighting back the urge to throw up. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and answered it. It was Mama. "What's going on? Scooter, where's Dicey?" Checking my wristwatch, I found it ticking again. The time was 7:35 p.m. Only 10 minutes had passed. We're at some place called Mercer Point, Mama. We're in trouble." I looked up at the billboard. The advertisement had changed, now announcing the 2024 Ford Bronco. "I'm on my way. I want you to..." Another scream pierced the night, sharp and chilling. I dropped the phone, my hands trembling. The winds blew harder, howling like tormented souls. I jumped to my feet. My legs felt like they were encased in concrete, refusing to obey the frantic commands of my brain. I fought through the fear and followed a shadowy path that cut through the picnic area. And there he was, Todd. Disheveled and sweaty, his bloodshot eyes and scratched face betrayed a violent encounter. "Baby brother," he murmured, his breath reeking of alcohol. "Welcome to the party." The dark tone in his voice was paralyzing. "Where's my sister?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "Over there," he pointed with his chin, cautiously. I maneuvered around him and found Dicey a few feet away, lying on the ground, gagging and coughing, her shirt wrapped tightly around her neck. Her eyes met mine, wide with fear, mirroring the haunted gaze of the mysterious girl from earlier. I dropped to my knees, my hands unsteady as I removed the shirt from around her neck. Suddenly, Todd seized me, his forearm coiled around my windpipe like an anaconda. and the cold blade of a knife pressed against my cheek. I heard tell your life flashes before your eyes as death comes calling. Tell me, boy, is that true? Todd grinned, a sinister light in his eyes as he poked me with the tip of the knife. A trickle of blood ran down the side of my face. I promise you won't feel a thing, son. Tears welled in my eyes as the fear within me reached its crescendo. I looked up at the moon, and unbidden and inexplicable, I whispered, Emma. Before Todd could carry out his threat, we were knocked face first into the sand. When I looked up, Dicey stood over us, wielding a tree limb. She began to beat Todd with it. I'll kill you! He roared, retaliating and knocking her down. They wrestled around in the sand until he was poised on top of her, ready to plunge the knife into her chest. I pounced on him, but with a single swing of his powerful arm, he swatted me away. As he raised the knife in the air, I yelled out Dicey's name. Then a single gunshot echoed, freezing everyone solid. It was Mama and Josh Higgins. Drop the knife and put your hands behind your head now, Josh Higgins ordered, his gun drawn on Todd. Todd complied, and Josh Higgins approached, slamming him face first into the sand before slapping a pair of cuffs on him, bringing an end to the nightmarish struggle. I crawled over to Dicey, who took me into her shuddering arms and held me tight. Mommy, Dicey cried, reaching up for Mama. My babies. Mama gasped and joined us on the ground. We held one another, a nod of shared relief and pain, letting our tears fall like a cascade. The harsh wind softened to a gentle breeze, and the crashing waves murmured a lullaby of solace. The moon above bore witness to the reunion, the horrors of a night on the precipice, fading into the background as the warmth of family enveloped us on the cold sand. We spent a few hours at the police station recounting our harrowing story to the officers. Todd was booked and locked away, justice making its slow but steady march. The weight of the night lingered in the air as we all shuffled into the motel room, the events etching indelible marks on our lives. I drew an image of the mysterious girl in my sketchbook, her haunting eyes staring at me yet again. And it hit me. Those were Dicey's eyes. Mama ran her fingers through my sister's hair, comforting her and gently guiding her into sleep. Exhausted, Mama too succumbed to the weariness of the night. I, however, couldn't find sleep. The profound impact of my experiences lingered in my thoughts. I had felt the magic of the universe, a force beyond comprehension. It opened my eyes to a whole other side of life, one that both amazed and scared me. The shadows of the past clung to the room like old paint, and as I stared into the dark, I wondered how we would emerge from the experiences of that fateful night. The next day, back at the police station, Josh shared more of the heart-wrenching tale of Emma Villanueva. He showed us a picture from the police files, and I was shocked. It was Emma I had run into last night. Born in 1969 in Paterson, New Jersey, Emma had been kicked out of her house by her parents when they discovered she was pregnant. She traveled from state to state, following the same unknown road that her daughter would traverse 16 years later, and ended up at the hospital in Tanis when her water broke, delivering a premature baby girl before vanishing into the void. No one heard a peep from her until her remains were discovered in the swamp. She had skull fractures, suggesting a brutal end. Emma had been struck on the back of the head with something hard and then discarded into the murk. Her identity surfaced through the army jacket she wore, which still bore her father's name sewn into it. A match with a missing persons report from 1985 and some DNA testing confirmed her identity. Her parents had passed away some years back, and there were no other relatives to contact. It was through state and hospital records that Josh Higgins discovered Mama. He learned that Emma's baby had been named Emily Standish by the couple who adopted her. He ran that name through the DMV, and the rest, as they say, is history. It's a cold case now. Josh Higgins said, the weight of the unresolved tragedy evident on his face. I showed Mama and Josh the sketch I made of Emma and recounted the events of the previous night to them, detailing my encounter with her. The metallic gray Supra and its driver, even though it seemed hard to believe even to me as I spoke the words. I begged for Mama and Josh to believe my story. Josh was dismissive at first, but Mama's pleas to look into the story must have touched him because he promised to investigate the matter thoroughly. We left the police station and went back to the motel room. Mama had arranged for Emma's burial at Rose Hill Cemetery, and 2 days later she was finally laid to rest. We held a small service for her, each of us dropping a single red rose into her grave as a tribute to the life cut short. At the conclusion of the service, as we made our way back to the car, Josh Higgins awaited us. He handed Mama a newspaper and told her to read the headline. Prominent Tannis resident takes own life. Josh stood somberly beside us, his presence a mix of sympathy and professional resolve, as Mama read the article. What does all this mean? Mama asked him. Josh sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. It means there's more to this town than meets the eye, he replied cryptically and casting a glance my way. Josh Higgins told us that when he ran the information into the DMV database, a positive match for a metallic gray Toyota Supra emerged. The vehicle had been registered to a Tannis man by the name of Donald Butcher back in 1985. Over the years, Butcher had transformed into a successful local businessman, husband, father, and community leader. The revelation sent shockwaves through our understanding of the events, weaving an unexpected connection between the shadows of the past and the seemingly ordinary present. Josh Higgins went to Butcher's house and questioned him about Emma, showing him her picture. The photo enraged the old man, and he violently expelled Josh from his house. Later that day, a call came into the local police. Shots fired at Butcher's residence. In a shocking turn of events, Butcher had taken his own life, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a possible chilling connection to the tale of Emma. Here, I think you might want this, Josh Higgins said, handing Mama the picture of Emma. Thank you, Mama replied, her eyes watery. Josh Higgins nodded. Dicey put up a comforting hand on Mama's shoulder, sharing in her grief. We're going home now, Mama said to Josh Higgins. Are you all gonna be okay? Josh Higgins asked, his eyes drifting down to my untied shoelaces. Dicey was about to tie them for me, but I stopped her and did it myself. It was a sloppy job, but it held. Mama smiled and replied, I think so. We got into the car, and it took Mama 3 turns of the key before it started. This car is gonna be classic someday, she said with a smile. Dicey turned to me and we both laughed. The song, Don't You Forget About Me, filled the car as we began to move. I lowered my window and shouted, I love you, Grandma. Dicey followed suit, and Mama, she whispered, I love you, Mom, as she brushed away her lingering tears. We pulled out of the cemetery and were on the road home. As we passed the town limits sign, I turned back and saw Emma on the shoulder of the road waving at me. She looked so beautiful happy, and free. And I waved back. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the mists forever. The final picture in my sketchbook was of Grandma, her face illuminated by a big, bright smile. And beneath it I wrote, "Rest in peace, Emma Villanueva."
Thank you, brave listeners, for joining me on another dark story. I urge my listeners to go out and find more content by our weekly author, if you're not too timid. If you enjoyed today's story and you've tuned in on YouTube, please click the like button. And if you don't want to miss future stories, and there's a lot of them, click the subscribe button. If you were present today on Spotify and enjoyed the story, you're more than welcome to leave a comment. And if you're on the Apple Podcast, please leave the show a rating as you see fit. All these things add up over time, and I do appreciate it. But wherever you are, please do me a favor and share today's story if you can. And then tune in next week for another frightening tale, if you're brave enough.